Quick video today on Zen and the Birds of Appetite by Thomas Merton. I just sat in a coffee shop today on holiday just reading the first chapter. A lovely read. This book was written shortly before the author's death, 1968. So I've got up to page 33. I have read it in the past, but here I'll comment on what I've read so far. So D.T. Suzuki was a great friend of his. Shida, I don't know anything about, can't remember anything. Is Buddhism life denying? That's something he looks at earlier on in the book and says it's a misconception. Wisdom in emptiness, this idea of emptiness, he's going to define as the void, sunyata, words, but the apophatic in God, the center, the being. Now, and the book concludes with Wisdom and Emptiness, a dialogue between these two great friends and authors. So the first chapters, as it were, the first section, looks at the Cartesian mentality. Thomas Merton rightly points out that, until recently people thought, hey, we're the same as the early Christians, or at least we can be, because we've got the same liturgies. You get this a lot in Orthodox circles, of course, and traditional Catholic circles, where they think, well, hey, what we have today is pretty much what the earliest Christians had, and the differences are accidental. He says, no, our mentality is forgive me, our mentality is completely different from the earliest Christians, who were eschatological to the core. They were expecting the imminent return of Jesus. And as that started to wane, the interest, the development of Christology became more to the fore. Who was Christ? What is the Trinity? All that starts to be fleshed out and concretized and systematized. And you get, rather than this kind of dynamic, prophetic, eschatological approach to Christianity, becomes more metaphysical. Christology, the Trinity, etc. And with that more static aspect comes the stability of an imperial, the Byzantine, the Roman Church, or churches, and in the Coptic, the Roman, the Byzantine churches, which were a source of stability for these empires, a source of inspiration, and all the rest of it. And there was then the great development. First of all, there's the martyrs, but then from martyrdom to then the ascetical, mystical, and the monastic developments in the early church, which were, pretty much alien to the earliest Christians, but were developments in the early church. But then Thomas Aquinas laments that in the modern era, you have many progressive Catholics that have moved to a kind of Cartesian approach of Christianity. I think, therefore I am. They deny mysticism as something irrelevant, as something unchristian even. I've certainly seen this in Protestant circles. You start quoting St. John of the Cross, or, Edith Stein, or, St. Basil, or the monastic fathers, and they cringe with embarrassment. Like, are they really Christian? And there's a centering on the word, and a loss of the sense of being. Cogito ergo sum is intellectual. I think, therefore I am. I reason, therefore I am. I cannot doubt that it's me that's doubting. So reason is the basis and foundation of my being, of my knowledge. And this is very different to the mystical path of the early church, whereby there's an experience, an encounter of being our contingent being, our being in its depth, where we encounter God, where we encounter self, where we encounter ourself, our being, our naked being. We encounter there God. Be still and know that I am God. We're definitely going to get a flavor of that in the Rhineland mystics, but way before that, the Spanish mystics, in the, of course, the Hesychastic tradition, the Desert Fathers, and all the rest in between, back and forth. So Thomas Merton certainly thought that he'd encountered something very special in the East that could help to revitalize the mystical depth of Christianity, and that it, just as people were getting very interested in ecumenical dialogue, Baptists, Catholics, etc., some progressives were saying, no, we can't dialogue with Buddhists and Hindus and things because, nah, they're not they're mystics, and we don't get it. We don't get all of that stuff. At least the Protestants, they got the same word, etc. Thomas Merton would refute such sentiments. Now, something here he says is that what the church today will need is three things. We all have a list. So he says, at first, the need for a real community to get us away from the alienation. A lot of this alienation comes from the cogito ergo sum, the I think, therefore I am. Our reason and intellect becomes the epicenter. And he asks a few pages earlier, can we really have an I-thou relationship, as Martin Buber famously talked about, an I-thou relationship, and not an I-it, an objectification of others, if we simply analyze them as intellectual objects. Also, this putting the self, the intellectualizing self, at the center of being means that we're going to be lonely. There's an alienation there. It's little old me pitted against the rest of the cosmos. I'm a visitor to the cosmos as opposed to I am the cosmos, a waking self within the larger self of the world of selves, as it were. Kosho Jiyama is absolutely splendid on that theme of, the larger self and coming into the awareness of that in Zen. If you're interested in that, interbeing is what Thich Nhat Hanh calls it. So the other thing is man's need for an adequate understanding of his everyday self in his ordinary life. So we can no longer just talk about, the idealistic philosophy that removes all reality into the celestial realms, heaven and hell, and particularly heaven. No, man needs to find ultimate sense here and now in the ordinary, humble tasks and human problems of every day. And, Zen obviously grounds one into the here and the now, the reality as it is, not as we'd like it to be. And it grounds us in a great stillness. Talk about Gasho. In Gasho is Hezekiah, is stillness, approaching life's frustrations in stillness, approaching life's lusts and storms and passions in Gasho, in stillness, and then taking that into everyday life. If that's not compatible with Christianity, I don't know what is. And then man's need for a whole and integral experience of his own self on all its levels. I really love this because so often I've thought, parish level Christianity is very, very superficial. The dip in on a Sunday, before taking the kids for a swim or whatever, just it's very superficial. If you go to a Zen seishin you know, a yoga ashram, you go anywhere, still Orthodox liturgy and that, you're touching the depths of being. But sometimes, modern parishes, it's just an intellectual dip of the cogito ergo sum, of intellectualization, mere thinking, and not helping us to awaken at every level of and grow at every level of our being: emotional, intellectual, spiritual, imaginative. There is no place for the cultivation of one part of human consciousness, one aspect of human experience. The PhD in theology, if you please, to the atrophy and detriment of everything else. Even on the pretext that what is cultivated is sacred and all the rest profane. That's a load of nonsense. This sacred and profane, we got rammed into it. My first year in the monastery, hay que quitar el profano. We have to get rid of the profane, we were told. But what is profane and what is sacred against dualism? It's just dualism, man. But it's true. I really like one of the Zen koans. It's, what is Buddha? One student or monk asks. The abbot replies, a shit stick. A fresh shit stick. Cleaning. Because Buddha awakened consciousness, which is body or bodhi. From there, the Buddha awakened one. He's in everything, in every aspect, from going to the loo to standing at the altar to receive Holy Communion. It's at every aspect of our being. So those three elements. One of the main suppositions here for Thomas Merton is that Zen isn't necessarily Zen Buddhism. I mean, sure it can be, but Zen is Zen. It's awakening. It's non-doctrinal, he says here in the conclusion to the first part. Concrete, direct, existential, and seeks above all to come to grips with life itself, not with ideas about life. This is central, not with ideas about life, still less with party platforms in politics, religion, science, or anything else. It's not activism, it's being. And that being helps us to be whatever we actually skillfully want to be. Better Christians, better husbands, better students, better teachers, better colleagues, better saints. And just to round this off, coming to the 13th century, was it early 14th, the anonymous author, The Cloud of Unknowing, and he said he was a Carthusian monk who wrote this, a dialogue between a novice and a Carthusian monk about really getting deep in prayer. And this section just says, consider only that you are, not thinking about what you are, but simply experiencing what you are. Absolutely beautiful. And very, very much in harmony with the experience of Zazen, of Shikantaza, of just sitting, just being aware moment to moment, just being in the present reality. And then he says, take good, gracious God as he is, and lay him as a poultice on your sick self as you are. Or if I may put it otherwise, begin with your disordered self, and just as you are, reach out in desire to touch good, gracious God as he is. And he goes on to say, don't be getting into all big thoughts about who God is and what he's like and all conceptual thought. All that now matters is that, stripped of all conceptual thought, you contemplate God in the eager longing of love. So shall you be gloriously united in spirit to the lovely being of God itself. God as he is, that and no more. It's it's the encounter at the existential level, at the ontological level, at the level of being, as opposed to at the intellectual level, this level of modern man, of the cogito ergo sum. I intellectualize, therefore I am. I rationalize, therefore I am. I judge, therefore I am. I spout nonsense, therefore I am. I am separate to everyone else and everything else, therefore I am. Getting away from that.